Hey, good to see you again. Tonight, a proud civilization will discover that the difference between primitive machinery and impossible machinery sometimes depends entirely on who is holding the tools. Here's how it happened. The first tool snapped before Elias Mercer had completed a single turn. The sharp crack echoed through the observation chamber of the Vair Dominion's Imperial Engineering Crucible, followed by the softer metallic chime of two broken fragments striking the floor. Elias remained crouched beside the exposed engine housing. He looked at the severed wrench handle in his right hand, then at the corroded pressure coupling he had been ordered to remove. Above him, behind a wall of transparent crystal, 48 Vair engineers watched in absolute silence. Chief Examiner Soren Tal stood at the center of the gallery, all four of his narrow arms folded against the silver plates of his ceremonial harness. The pale membranes along his neck fluttered with restrained satisfaction. The human had been working for 11 minutes. Already, one of the tools had failed. Soren turned slightly toward Imperial Auditor Veska Rune. The Dominion's representative had traveled across 9 star systems to witness this test, and her report would determine whether humanity would be admitted into the Stellar Guild of Applied Engineering. The result appears increasingly predictable, Soren said. Veska's black eyes remained fixed on the chamber below. The human does not appear concerned. Humans often mistake ignorance for confidence, Soren replied. Inside the crucible, Elias placed the broken wrench carefully on the floor. He did not throw it aside. He did not complain. Instead, he ran one gloved finger along the fracture line. The metal had not broken cleanly. A dark seam passed through its center, hidden beneath the polished surface. Elias glanced up at the observation gallery. Was that supposed to happen? He asked. His voice carried through the chamber's translation field. Soren activated the communication panel. The tools provided are standard examples from the Vair Industrial Archive. A qualified engineer should be capable of using them. Elias looked again at the fracture. Of course, he said. He set the pieces beside his knee and reached for the next tool. It was a torque driver, long and slender, with a triangular socket shaped for Vair machinery. Its casing bore the crest of the Imperial Foundries, although the crest had been stamped unevenly. Elias tested the driver against the engine coupling. The tool slipped. He tried again. The internal teeth stripped away. A second piece of equipment failed within 13 minutes. Murmurs moved through the gallery. Soren's throat membranes lifted. The test was unfolding exactly as he had designed it. For 4,000 years, the Vair Dominion had measured civilization through the perfection of its instruments. Their oldest surviving religious texts described creation itself as a mechanism assembled by divine hands. Every citizen was taught that chaos existed only where proper tools had not yet been invented. To the Vair, engineering was not merely an occupation. It was proof of moral advancement. Their cities unfolded from planetary crusts in geometric precision. Their vessels were constructed by machines whose calibration tolerances were smaller than living cells. Their fusion cores could operate for 300 years without requiring manual adjustment. Across 620 inhabited systems, Vair instruments had become the standard by which all others were judged. A species that could not use them was considered unprepared. A species that damaged them was considered primitive. A species that required improvised tools was considered dangerous. Humanity had done all three. The first human delegation to visit a Vair foundry had caused a quiet scandal when one engineer had repaired a malfunctioning coolant pump using a fastening strip cut from an equipment case. Another human technician had struck a jammed magnetic valve with the handle of a diagnostic probe. Both repairs had worked. That had made the offense worse. To Vair doctrine, successful improvisation was not evidence of skill. It was evidence that humanity tolerated disorder so profound that its people had learned to survive within it. Soren had spent 2 years studying human machines. He had examined civilian cargo vessels that contained components from 12 manufacturers. He had watched recordings of human crews modifying engines during flight. He had reviewed maintenance reports filled with substitutions, handwritten corrections, and temporary repairs that remained installed for decades. He believed he understood them. Human technology functioned not because it was refined, but because it was overbuilt. Humans used thick supports, where elegant structures would suffice. They installed redundant systems because they did not trust their primary ones. They carried toolkits because they expected their creations to fail. The Vere created perfection. Humans created things that survived imperfection. To Soren, the distinction was decisive. The Stellar Guild required its members to share technology across species. If humanity entered the guild, human engineers would gain access to the most advanced industrial archives in known space. Soren feared what they would do with knowledge they lacked the discipline to respect, so he had proposed the Crucible. The test appeared simple. A human mechanic would be given a damaged Vere engine and a complete set of approved tools. If the human restored the machine within 12 hours, humanity would be granted provisional entry into the guild. What the human delegation did not know was that the tools were not complete. Every item had been deliberately weakened. Some contained hidden fractures. Others had been misaligned by fractions of a degree. Diagnostic instruments had been recalibrated to provide false readings. Cutting implements had been dulled. Power cells had been drained. Soren did not consider this deception. He considered it a simulation of reality. Primitive cultures frequently blamed their tools when they lacked the knowledge to perform a task. The test would reveal whether humanity's reputation rested on genuine understanding or fortunate accidents. The engine itself had been selected with equal care. It was an obsolete but sophisticated Vere gravitic drive removed from the survey vessel Silent Measure. The engine had crossed interstellar space for 170 years before a containment failure rendered it inoperable. 3 Vere repair teams had examined it. All 3 concluded that restoring the machine would require a complete industrial facility. The human had been given 1 chamber, 1 damaged engine, and a collection of tools that would fail one by one. Soren expected frustration, then desperation, then surrender. What he did not expect was for Elias Mercer to smile. Back aboard the human diplomatic ship Resolute Hand, Ambassador Nadia Okafor watched the test through a delayed transmission. 26 human engineers surrounded her in the vessel's briefing hall, each studying a separate stream of sensor data. Elias had been chosen because he was not humanity's most celebrated engineer. That had confused the Vere. They had expected a university director, a military propulsion architect, or one of the researchers who had designed the first human jump lattice. Instead, humanity sent a maintenance chief. Elias Mercer was 43 years old. He had grown up on Ceres Station, where every kilogram of metal had to be shipped across millions of kilometers, and nothing useful was discarded. He had spent 12 years maintaining mining craft, 8 years repairing colonial transports, and 6 years supervising emergency recovery teams. He held no ceremonial engineering rank. He had never designed a starship. He had simply kept thousands of them alive. Ambassador Okafor leaned toward the transmission. "He knows," she said. Dr. Lena Voronov, chief propulsion analyst of the Resolute Hand, nodded. He knew after the first tool broke. Can he prove it? Lena studied the engine schematic projected above the central table. That depends on whether he decides to repair their engine or their attitude. Several engineers laughed quietly. Nadia did not. Humanity's application to the Stellar Guild had already been rejected twice. The official explanations cited incompatible safety standards and insufficient technological maturity. Unofficially, the older civilizations considered human engineering undignified. Human ships were too easy to modify. Human systems used too many manual controls. Human crews carried replacement components that had not been produced by the vessel's original builder. To the Guild, technology was a finished statement. To humanity, it was an ongoing conversation. Elias understood the cultural difference. Before entering the Crucible, he had spent 3 months studying Vere doctrine. He knew they believed the tool defined the limits of the engineer. Nadia suspected he had accepted the test for one reason. He wanted to show them that an engineer defined the limits of the tool. Inside the chamber, Elias examined the 3rd instrument. It was a resonance scanner intended to locate fractures within the gravitic field chamber. According to its display, the engine's primary ring was structurally intact. According to the vibration he felt through the casing, it was not. Elias switched off the scanner. He removed his left glove and placed his palm against the engine housing. Chief Examiner Soren's voice emerged from the communication field. Physical contact is not required. The scanner provides all relevant information. Does it? Elias asked. The instrument was calibrated according to imperial standards. Elias tapped the housing with one finger. A low tone rang through the chamber. He moved his hand 20 centimeters and tapped again. The tone was higher. He continued along the curved shell, listening to each response. The engineers in the gallery began shifting uneasily. Vescaroon watched the human's face. What is he doing? Soren hesitated. He is attempting to locate a structural defect through acoustic variation. Is that effective? Not at this level of complexity. Below them, Elias stopped tapping. He marked 3 positions on the housing with streaks of grease. Then he disassembled the scanner. Soren unfolded his arms. The human removed the scanner's outer casing, separated its emitter array, and extracted a thin conductive filament from the power regulator. Chief Examiner, Veska said, is dismantling the equipment permitted. The rules state that he may use every tool provided. That is not the same as destroying them. Soren activated the communication channel. Engineer Mercer, the instruments belong to the Dominion. Elias did not look up. I'll put back everything I don't need. The gallery fell silent again. Using the scanner filament and part of the broken wrench, Elias fashioned a crude vibration needle. He attached it to the engine casing and struck the metal. The filament trembled. He moved it to the second grease mark. The vibration doubled. At the third, the filament became almost invisible. Elias nodded to himself. There you are, he said. He began opening the outer housing. The supplied fasteners resisted every approved tool. Some had been fused by heat. Others had warped during the silent measure's containment failure. Elias tried the Vare cutting torch. Its power cell died after 4 seconds. He inspected the depleted cell, then opened the casing of the stripped torque driver. The driver contained a smaller but compatible power unit. Soren's throat membranes tightened as the human connected the 2 devices. That configuration is not approved, he said. Elias continued working. Neither is giving a mechanic a dead torch. The modified tool ignited. Its flame was uneven, unstable, and almost twice the expected temperature. Elias adjusted the fuel intake manually and began cutting through the first fused fastener. Vescaroon moved closer to the crystal wall. He joined 2 incompatible systems, she said. They are not incompatible, Soren replied. They merely were not designed to function together. The auditor turned one black eye toward him. I believe the human would consider those statements contradictory. For the next hour, Elias reduced the Vare toolkit to components. The broken wrench became a lever. The diagnostic scanner became a vibration detector. The torque driver donated its power cell. A warped alignment rod became a straight edge after Elias heated it, pressed it beneath the engine casing, and allowed the machine's own weight to reform it. He used the reflective surface of an inspection plate to direct light into the engine's interior. He used a coolant hose as a pressure test line. He used the foam lining of the equipment chest to seal 3 leaking valves. Each act disturbed the Vare observers more than the last. To them, every instrument had a defined purpose written at the moment of its creation. A cutting torch was a cutting torch. A scanner was a scanner. A wrench was a wrench. The human treated them as temporary arrangements of material. Soren reminded himself that none of this meant the engine would function. Cleverness was not mastery. Adaptation was not understanding. Then Elias opened the gravitic chamber, and Soren's confidence began to fracture. The chamber contained 12 concentric field rings, each suspended by magnetic bearings. The rings had once rotated in perfect opposition, creating a controlled distortion in local space. Now the 6th ring was split. The 8th was bent. The central stabilizer had fused against its mounting column. 3 Vare teams had seen the same damage and declared the engine beyond field repair. Elias sat beside it for nearly 10 minutes without moving. Soren interpreted the stillness as defeat. Veska interpreted it differently. He is rebuilding the system in his mind, she said. No organic mind can model 12 gravitic rings simultaneously. Perhaps a human mind does not require all 12. Soren looked at her. The drive was designed with 12. The auditor's membranes shifted in the Vare equivalent of amusement. You continue to speak about design. He continues to speak about function. Elias finally stood. "I need access to the Silent Measure's final flight data," he said. Soren replied immediately. "External information is not part of the test. The data concerns this engine. The engine's diagnostic archive is available through the provided terminal." The terminal had been deliberately altered to omit the last 16 minutes of the survey vessel's journey. Elias studied the archive. He saw the gap at once. "There's missing data," he said. "A storage fault occurred during the accident," Soren replied. Elias looked toward the observation gallery. "That's unfortunate." He returned to the engine. For the first time, Nadia Okafor saw uncertainty in his expression. Dr. Lena Voronov enlarged the transmitted image. "They've hidden the failure sequence," she said. "Without it, he won't know whether the field collapse began in the rings or the stabilizer. Can he infer it from the damage? Possibly. But if he guesses wrong, the rebuilt engine may tear itself apart." Nadia watched Elias inspect the central column. The Veer were not merely testing his skill. They had engineered uncertainty into every part of the challenge. The tools lied. The records lied. The engine carried damage that no one could fully explain. Still, Elias did not protest. He crouched beside the stabilizer and began removing its fused mounting brackets. 2 hours passed. The human consumed no food. He paused only to drink water and clean metal dust from his eyes. The Veer engineers rotated through rest periods. Elias did not. He extracted the stabilizer by building a lifting frame from the toolkit's carrying handles. He removed the 6th and 8th rings. He measured the surviving 10 using a strip cut from his own belt buckle. Then he did something Soren had not anticipated. He began redesigning the engine. At first, the change appeared minor. Elias shifted the 4th ring's mounting position by 3 millimeters. Then he inverted the rotation direction of the 9th. He removed 2 control relays and rewired their channels into a shared circuit. Soren opened the communication field. "Engineer Mercer, you are deviating from the original configuration." "The original configuration broke," Elias replied. "Your task is to restore the engine. My task is to make it work. You cannot alter the geometry of a gravitic array without modeling the resulting field." Elias glanced toward the gallery. "I am modeling it." "With what computational system?" Elias lifted the broken wrench handle and tapped the side of his helmet. Soren stared at him. Laughter emerged from the human observers aboard the Resolute Hand, but Nadia noticed that Lena Voronov was not laughing. She was tracing Elias's changes across the schematic. "What does he see?" Nadia asked. Lena enlarged the field geometry. "He isn't trying to recreate the 12-ring engine. He's converting it into a 10-ring engine. Can that work?" "Not according to Veer theory. According to ours?" Lena's eyes widened as the simulation completed. "According to ours, it might be better. The original engine used 12 rings to maintain a perfectly symmetrical distortion field. That symmetry reduced vibration and allowed the machine to operate with extraordinary precision. It also created a hidden weakness. When one ring failed, every other ring compensated equally. The correction propagated through the entire chamber, overloading the stabilizer and turning a local fault into a total collapse. Elias's design was less elegant. The 10 surviving rings would not produce perfect symmetry. Instead, they would operate in 5 paired groups, each capable of adjusting independently. A failure in one pair would reduce performance, but the damage would remain contained. The rebuilt system would vibrate more. It would consume additional coolant. It would also survive the exact accident that had destroyed the original. Lena leaned back from the projection. "He found the flaw," she said. Nadia looked at her. "In the damaged engine?" "In their philosophy." The test entered its 6th hour. Soren Tal could no longer conceal his concern. He summoned senior architect Darren Voss, one of the engineers who had originally examined the Silent Measure's drive. Darren arrived in the gallery with 3 assistants and immediately demanded access to the human's modifications. "The simulations cannot be trusted," Darren said. "He is using measurements taken with improvised equipment." "The measurements are within acceptable tolerances," Veska replied. "Acceptable human tolerances, perhaps." The Imperial auditor faced him. "The engine has remained unusable for 23 years under Veer tolerances." Darren's neck membranes darkened. Below them, Elias had begun repairing the split 6th ring. He could not restore its original shape. The metal's internal structure had been damaged by gravitic stress, and the crucible contained no forge capable of reforming it. Instead, he cut the ring into 5 equal segments. A collective sound of distress passed through the Veer engineers. Soren activated the communication field so quickly that his hand struck the panel. "Stop immediately," he ordered. Elias paused. "You have destroyed a primary field ring," Soren said. "It was already destroyed. It could have been reconstructed in an Imperial foundry. Then it wouldn't have been repaired here. The test requires you to repair the engine using the tools provided. That's what I'm doing. You have cut the ring apart. I need 5 bridge plates." The Veer observers looked at one another. Elias placed each segment across a weakened section of the remaining rings. The damaged field ring became reinforcement for the others. Darren Voss stepped close to the crystal. "He is redistributing the conductor mass." Soren's voice became cold. "I can see that." "No," Darren said. "You do not understand. The original rings were tuned individually. He is making their mass equal." Elias fused the final segment into place, using the modified torch. The 5 paired assemblies now possessed nearly identical density. Their shapes were imperfect, but their differences balanced one another. For the first time, Darren looked impressed. "He is not repairing components," the architect said. "He is repairing relationships between components." Soren said nothing. At the beginning of the 7th hour, Elias encountered the problem he could not solve with the materials provided. The engine's central stabilizer had melted along one side. Its superconductive core remained intact, but the outer lattice could no longer hold the magnetic field in alignment. Without a new lattice, the stabilizer would fail the moment power entered the drive. Elias searched the toolkit. He examined the chamber walls. He inspected his clothing. Nothing available possessed the necessary combination of conductivity, flexibility, and heat resistance. He sat on the floor. For 11 minutes, he stared at the damaged stabilizer. The Veer gallery remained silent. Soren felt his confidence returning. Improvisation had limits. Material reality could not be persuaded. The human had been inventive, but the engine demanded a component he could not fabricate. Elias finally stood and faced the gallery. "I need a piece of the observation wall," he said. Soren's membranes flared. "Absolutely not. The crystal contains a conductive lattice," Elias said. "A strip 12 centimeters wide would be enough. The observation barrier is part of the crucible. Then it's in the chamber. It is not a tool." Neither was my belt buckle. Veska Rune stepped toward the communication panel. "Chief Examiner, the test rules allow the engineer to use materials present within the enclosed environment." Soren turned on her. "The barrier protects the observers from a potential field rupture. Then remove the observers." The gallery erupted into argument. Darren Voss supported the human's request. 3 Imperial safety officials opposed it. The guild representatives demanded a formal interpretation of the test conditions. Throughout the dispute, Elias waited. At last, Veska exercised her authority as Imperial auditor. The gallery was evacuated. Robotic cutters removed a narrow section from the lower edge of the crystal wall. The transparent material was transferred into the chamber through a sealed maintenance port. Elias held it toward the overhead light. Hair-thin conductive threads gleamed inside the crystal. He smiled. "Perfect," he said. Soren watched from a remote control room, surrounded by displays. He had designed the test to deprive the human of reliable tools. He had not considered that the human might dismantle the testing facility. For the next 90 minutes, Elias transformed the crystal strip into a replacement stabilizer lattice. He heated it slowly to soften its internal layers. He used the engine housing as a curved mold. He separated the conductive threads with the sharpened edge of the broken torque driver. The work required precision the Veer had believed impossible without automated equipment. Elias's hands shook from fatigue. Twice he stopped and pressed his fingers against the floor until the tremor passed. Nadia Okafor watched from the resolute hand. "He needs rest," she said. Lena Voronov shook her head. "He's close enough to see the whole machine now. He won't step away." "Can the lattice hold?" "For startup, yes. Beyond that, I don't know." Nadia studied the countdown clock. 3 hours remained. The human delegation could intervene. They could accuse the Veer of sabotage, demand an investigation, and withdraw from the test with their dignity intact. Nadia knew Elias would refuse. This was no longer about entering the Stellar Guild. It was about answering a question the galaxy had been asking since humanity left Earth. What could humans build when everything functioned as intended? Many species had already seen that. The more important question was what humans could build when nothing did. At the 9th hour, Elias installed the stabilizer. At the 10th, he completed the control circuits. At the 11th, he began testing the coolant flow. The engine leaked from 7 points. He sealed 4 with material from the equipment chest. He repaired 2 by reshaping damaged valve collars. The 7th leak emerged from a fracture too narrow to access. Elias connected the coolant hose to the chamber and increased the pressure. The fracture widened. A spray of silver fluid burst across the floor. Soren exhaled in relief. The human had made an irreversible mistake. Elias shut down the pressure and inspected the opened fracture. Then he nodded. Lena Voronov began laughing. Nadia looked at her. What happened? He needed access to the crack. He couldn't reach it while it was small, so he made it larger. Elias cut the damaged section away, folded a replacement patch from the scanner casing, and fused it over the opening. The coolant system held. 42 minutes remained. Soren returned to the crucible gallery with Veska Rune and Darren Voss. The damaged section of observation wall remained open, forcing them to stand behind a temporary field barrier. Elias moved around the engine one final time. Fragments of broken equipment covered the floor. Every approved tool had been altered. Some were unrecognizable. The Veyer engine looked different as well. Its exposed field rings no longer formed the perfect geometry of Imperial design. Reinforcement plates crossed their surfaces. Control lines followed new paths. The crystal lattice around the central stabilizer caught the light like frozen lightning. It was inelegant. It was asymmetrical. It looked alive. Elias approached the control console. Soren activated the communication field. "You have 27 minutes remaining," he said. "I only need 1. You have not performed an automated integrity analysis. The analyzer was lying. You have not calibrated the ring alignment. I did. By hand? Yes. You have removed 2 primary field rings, redirected the control circuits, and replaced an Imperial stabilizer lattice with material cut from a wall. That's also correct." Soren's membranes trembled. "If you activate this engine, the chamber may not contain the failure." Elias looked toward the temporary barrier. "Then you should stand farther back." He placed his hand on the ignition control. Darren Voss leaned toward the communicator. "Engineer Mercer, wait." Elias paused. The Veyer architect looked at the altered drive. His voice was quieter than before. "Why did you reinforce the 3rd and 7th rings more heavily than the others?" "Because they carried the first overload. The archive does not contain the failure sequence." "The archive doesn't," Elias said. "The engine does." Darren stared at him. Elias continued. "The stabilizer melted on the port side, but the heat pattern curves inward. That means the ring field collapsed before the stabilizer failed. The 3rd and 7th bearings show opposite scoring, so they twisted against each other. The 6th ring broke because it tried to correct both. The 8th bent when the stabilizer locked." He gestured toward the machine. "The drive didn't fail everywhere at once. It failed in a chain. Your design forced every part to protect every other part. When one couldn't, they all died together." Soren's voice hardened. The silent measure crossed interstellar space for 170 years. "Yes," Elias replied. "It was a beautiful engine." The human looked at the reconstructed drive. "But beautiful things still break." He activated the ignition. Power entered the engine. The first ring rotated, then the second. One by one, the 5 paired assemblies began moving. Slowly at first, their altered surfaces passing through bands of blue light. The chamber vibrated. Soren gripped the edge of the console. A warning appeared across every display. Field asymmetry detected. The Veyer safety system attempted to shut the engine down. Elias overrode it. The vibration deepened. The rings accelerated. Silver coolant flowed through improvised lines. The crystal stabilizer lattice filled with light. A low-pressure wave moved through the chamber, lifting dust from the floor in expanding circles. Field asymmetry increasing. Soren felt vindication and terror in equal measure. The machine would fail. It had to fail. Then the 5 ring pairs adjusted independently. The first pair slowed by 2%. The second shifted its phase. The third absorbed the imbalance and redirected it into the 4th. The fifth released the remaining distortion through the stabilizer. The vibrations stopped, not gradually, instantly. The engine became silent. At its center, space folded. A sphere of darkness appeared above the stabilizer, no larger than Elias's hand. Light bent around it in a perfect halo. Every instrument in the gallery registered a stable gravitic field. Darren Voss stepped toward the barrier. "Impossible," he whispered. Elias watched the readings. The field strength climbed beyond the engine's original specification. 104%, 109, 117. The rebuilt drive reached 123% of its former output and stabilized. Soren's hands fell away from the console. He stared at the engine that 3 VAR teams had declared irreparable. The human had restored it with broken tools. No. That understanding was no longer sufficient. The human had taken the damaged tools, the destroyed components, and part of the testing chamber itself. He had rebuilt the engine around its own failure. He had removed the weakness hidden inside its perfection. He had made it better. Elias reduced the power level. The dark sphere collapsed into a point and vanished. The rings continued rotating. The engine remained active. Darren opened the communication channel. "What is its expected operational lifespan?" he asked. Elias studied the coolant pressure and field stability. "With proper replacement parts, probably another 200 years. And without them?" Elias considered the question. "Maybe 40. The VAR architect's membranes lifted in disbelief. 40 years in this condition. It'll need maintenance. How frequently?" Elias looked at the patched valves, improvised circuits, and crystal stabilizer. "At first, every 6 months. Darren absorbed the answer. The engine was not perfect. It would require attention. Parts would wear. Adjustments would be necessary. Engineers would have to listen to its vibrations and learn its habits. Yet it would continue. Soren Tal entered the chamber after the engine had completed its first full power cycle. He walked slowly among the remains of the VAR toolkit. The broken wrench lay beside the control console. The torque driver had been reduced to an empty shell. The diagnostic scanner existed only as scattered pieces distributed throughout the repaired machine. Elias sat against the engine housing, exhausted. Soren stopped before him. "You knew the tools were defective," the chief examiner said. Elias looked up. "Yes. When?" "The first wrench had a fracture line beneath the plating. The torque driver's teeth were made from the wrong alloy. The scanner was offset by almost 8%. "Why did you continue?" Elias wiped grease from his hands. "Because the engine was still broken." Soren's membranes tightened. "You could have exposed the test." "I just did." The words carried no anger. That made them heavier. Veska Rune entered with Darren Voss and several guild representatives. The Imperial Auditor held a data tablet containing every record from the Crucible. "Chief Examiner Soren Tal," she said, "the sabotage of the provided equipment has been confirmed." Soren did not turn around. "The Stellar Guild's decision will account for this violation," Veska continued. Elias pushed himself to his feet. "No," he said. Every VAR in the chamber looked at him. Nadia Okafor's voice came through the communication system from the resolute hand. "Elias, you are not authorized to dismiss a diplomatic violation." "I'm not dismissing it," Elias replied. He faced Soren. The test was dishonest, but the question wasn't. Soren finally turned. "What question?" "Whether humans can be trusted with your technology." Elias placed one hand on the engine. "You think we treat machines carelessly because we change them. You think replacing a part means disrespecting the people who designed it. You think improvisation is what happens when knowledge fails." He glanced at the altered rings. "For us, improvisation is knowledge under pressure." Darren Voss moved closer to the engine. "Why did you preserve the original control core?" he asked. "Replacing it would have simplified your modifications." "Because it was still good. You dismantled every instrument provided to you. They weren't good." The architect studied him. "Then your doctrine is not that all things may be altered." "No," Elias said. "Our doctrine is simpler." He looked at Soren. "Understand what matters, save what works, change what doesn't. Never let pride decide which is which." For several moments, only the engine could be heard. Its 10 rings turned with a faint, imperfect rhythm. Soren had spent his life believing perfection was the highest form of respect. Every VAR engineer inherited the work of those before them and preserved it with exacting care. Yet the Silent Measure's engine had remained dead for 23 years because no Weyer had been willing to alter the principles of its design. The human had honored those principles differently. He had preserved the engine's purpose, not its shape. Soren bent down and lifted the broken wrench handle. "You knew this would fail," he said. "I suspected it. And you used it anyway. Only the part that wasn't broken." Soren examined the metal. A thin section near the grip had become part of the engine's manual release mechanism. The tool had failed as a wrench. It had succeeded as something else. The Stellar Guild convened an emergency session 12 hours later. Representatives from 47 civilizations gathered in the Hall of Measures. The Weyer delegation expected a formal dispute over the sabotage test. Instead, Ambassador Nadia Okafor submitted one request. She asked that the Crucible recording be played without commentary. For 11 hours, the assembled representatives watched Elias Mercer work. They saw the wrench break, they saw the scanner lie, they saw the torch fail. They watched the human dismantle each useless instrument and recover the value hidden inside it. Some species considered the process crude. Others found it disturbing. By the time Elias cut apart the damaged field ring, no representative looked away. When the rebuilt engine reached 123% output, the Hall of Measures became silent. Chief Examiner Soren Tall addressed the Guild. He did not defend his actions. He did not ask forgiveness. He presented the conclusion his doctrine required. The human passed the test, he said. Not the test we claim to offer, the test we actually gave him. The Weyer representatives lowered their heads. Soren continued. We tested whether humanity could operate our technology under approved conditions. Humanity demonstrated something more valuable. They can preserve its purpose after every approved condition has failed. The vote to admit humanity was unanimous. In the decades that followed, the Stellar Guild changed more than its membership. Weyer engineering academies established courses in adaptive repair. Human mechanics traveled to imperial shipyards. Weyer architects visited mining colonies, orbital habitats and exploration vessels where no two machines remained identical for long. At first, the partnership was difficult. Weyer engineers documented every adjustment. Human engineers adjusted things before the documentation arrived. The Weyer demanded exact replacement components. The humans asked what materials were available. Yet together, they built machines neither civilization could have created alone. Weyer precision gave humanity systems of astonishing efficiency. Human resilience gave Weyer systems the ability to survive beyond their intended limits. Within 60 years, their joint engines powered vessels across 900 inhabited systems. Those engines were elegant where elegance mattered, redundant where failure was possible, and accessible wherever a living hand might one day need to reach inside. The rebuilt drive from the Silent Measure was never returned to service. It was placed in the central hall of the Imperial Engineering Academy. The engine remained operational. Its asymmetrical rings continued turning behind a transparent barrier repaired with a visible metal frame. The improvised crystal lattice still glowed around the stabilizer. Beside the display rested the broken wrench handle. Generations of Weyer students stood before it. They were told that the engine represented the day humanity proved its worth. That was not entirely true. Humanity had not needed the Stellar Guild's approval to possess worth. The engine represented the day the Guild learned how little it understood about strength. Strength was not the refusal to break. Strength was knowing what to do afterward. It was the hand that reached for a shattered tool and found one useful edge. It was the mind that looked at a ruined machine and saw not what had been lost, but what still remained. And long after the names of the examiners faded from common memory, the engine continued to turn. Not perfectly, not quietly, but better.